Welcome to the Trending XR podcast, where we discuss the latest in augmented reality, virtual reality, and AI with industry leaders who are shaping the future of how we will work, socialize, and go about our daily lives in the third dimension. In the not-so-distant future, we won't even be using phones. We'll be using these. I know, sounds crazy, but we have never been closer to this future concept becoming our current reality. I am so excited to share this new world with you. I hope to teach you, inspire you, and ignite your passion for extended reality. It's time to change dimensions. Are you coming? Welcome back to Trending XR Podcast. Today's guest is the go-to-market lead for Teleport, a cloud platform for automating digital twin workflows, which is part of the Varjo family of products. Varjo is a computer hardware manufacturer that specializes in military-grade VR headsets for training and operations. I'd like to welcome on Sebastian Gregor. Welcome to the podcast, man.
Hey,
thanks for being here.
Nice to talk to you. Nice to chat.
Yeah, this is like a lot of the podcasts is gonna be great, but this one's like extra special. I think this is gonna get into some like topics that we haven't talked about on the podcast yet, which is always exciting. And you happen to be like super intelligent in the space on these, and I think people are gonna like just be kind of entertained throughout this entire segment, just because there's so many cool things we're talking about. So like I guess I'll turn it over to you. I'd like to kick it off with, and I always ask every guest this before we get into the tech. I always want to start with your story. So where did you get started? What was maybe a special event or a specific recallable moment that you were like, oh, this is like the future for me? Or was it a series of things that kind of breadcrumbed you to where you're at now at the frontier of XR and digital twins and VR headsets?
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on and appreciate the kind words. I think it's hard for me to say that it was one single event that got me into XR. I think it was kind of like a sequence of different events that started pretty late in college, so quite some time ago now, when I first started getting into XR. I think like a lot of other people, we had hints of XR inspiration here and there. So, I saw like that Black Mirror episode with the augmented reality contact lenses. That resonated with me really early on, and I loved that tech, and I always thought, how could we get to that stage in reality? But then, moving on later on in life and exploring some different tech and some different career paths and some different fields, like I was going down the finance routes, the entrepreneurship routes, very deep in business school at Boston University. And something just kind of like struck during COVID where I wanted to go back and explore the whole XR tech space. Like it always sat in the back of my mind. I always thought it was the coolest technology on the planet, that there's really nothing like it. And I just wanted to see like, would that kind of like AR contacts idea be possible? So I spent a lot of my senior year in college trying to answer that question and just like reading patents front to back, like hundreds of pages of like really dull literature, and like taking notes and retranscribing and writing these patents up on AR contacts, during COVID, at a really weird time in the world where like everything's shut down and my classes are online. And so I'm paying attention to them even less than I normally would. And there's this like really weird dynamic and mix of things going on in my life. And while I was doing that research, I came across Varjo, actually. Varjo in 2020 had just released the XR3, which was kind of like our flagship headset, like our go-to headset that really changed the game for XR and mixed reality headsets specifically. It was super high resolution, much higher than anything else on the market. It was comfortable, it was sleek, it was really great hardware. It was useful for so many different use cases. I mean, it was just completely ahead of the game. And marketing-wise and branding-wise, they were also just so far ahead. I always thought that was the coolest brand as well. And so I came across that company. I thought it was really cool, continued to learn about XR tech, but graduated college and figured it's probably time to go get a real job, and none of these XR guys are going to listen to me, even if I'm this passionate. I need to have some kind of like credibility. So I spent 2 years working at some big tech companies, some larger tech companies, a smaller cybersecurity tech startup as well, just gaining some experience in sales, in solutions engineering, in sales department. And then kind of in the background of doing that, I was also taking like XR development courses with Unity. And so I was doing a boot camp, I was doing XR development and learning some of the technicals behind what is XR and trying to gain some credibility. And then in 2023, there was this solutions engineer position that opened up here at Varjo. It was to be the first solutions engineer for what was at the time our cloud streaming service, which is Varjo Reality Cloud. Took a shot for it, was lucky enough to convince some of the other folks here to take a shot on me. And yeah, that's where we've been since. Over the last like 2.5 years since I joined Varjo, I've been working on all sorts of XR tech, mostly in the software side of our business, which I think is a little bit less known than our hardware and our headsets. But nonetheless, super exciting, tons of great developments on that side. And that's been my day today. I like to say that like really no day is the same as the day before, the week before. I mean, I just told you before this podcast, we were like researching the ins and outs of the real estate industry and how intricate it gets and all the connections and relationships. And like, that's not something you'd expect to do working in XR software, right? And, last week
No.
it was AEC companies, and the week before that it might have been design firms and architecture companies. Like, there's so much variety in this industry, which makes it so interesting and unique.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah.
that's kind of what brought me here. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great story, and that's, I mean, yeah, yes, like that's again, me too, why I love this, because I'm so curious about so many different things that it's so fun to see how applicable extended reality can be, and also what you're doing with teleport can be to like all these different types of industries. So it's like really exciting. It keeps you on your toes. You get to learn about all sorts of stuff. I think there was because we had talked about both of these things actually at Archon, so, Reality Capture Network. This is where we met, and it was really fun. But we had some like deep conversations about AR contacts, and also there's a cool story, like a brief cool story about how you got that job, right? Wasn't there like a recruiter who was like, "Don't bother, you're not gonna get the job," and you're like, "Yeah, I'm gonna do it anyways," and then you got the job. I thought that was a neat
um,
story.
yeah, there's a little bit of like more backstory to it. I am actually decently close with that person who like helped me land that job, and so
Okay.
she's great, and I'm really grateful for having her guidance during that process. But basically, the story goes, I was doing a Unity developer boot camp at the time. It was like a 24-week program, and I was doing this just after work. Part of that boot camp, just like any other boot camp, is they try and match you with a career position, right? With a job that's in the industry that you're looking to move into. For most people, it was like game development. For me, obviously, it was the XR field. That was my focus. Um, at the beginning stages of that career matching point, they ask you, like, can you list 20 different jobs, 20 different companies you'd like to go work for? And I just sent back that list with one job role and one
That's
company. And I
right.
was like, I just want this role. Like, I don't want anything else. It was only focused on this. I was like, the whole point of this entire excursion and development and certifications is for this job. They thought that was a little strange. They kind of pushed back and asked me to add a few more to the list. I was like, I'm not adding more to the list. Like, it's that or nothing. They were like, okay, guess we'll help you try and get that. We had conversations over it, position your resume, whatever typical kind of job stuff you'll do in that case.
Yeah.
And then I think about like, I want to say it was like 6 months after I finished the boot camp, I put that update on my LinkedIn, and the person I had been working with was like, wow, that's so great. It's incredible. Like, great job. I'm really proud of you. Great to see that happen. I think it's just kind of a funny story. Like, the XR industry doesn't have a ton of open job opportunities, right? Like Meta
Right.
does, and they're a
Yeah.
very big company in the space. And now some other big tech companies like Apple, Samsung have been leaning into XR, and they've been hiring, and it's great to see the industry growing. But even back in 2023, before those big players got into the XR market, it was super limited. So the positioning there was like, I'm going for maybe there's like 100 jobs or 1,000 XR jobs in the world, right? And I need to like position myself to be the perfect candidate for that one job. And I guess I did a good enough job of fooling my hiring managers and my bosses, and they took a shot at me, and they were willing to take the chance with me, and I'm really really grateful for that. So kind of a
Yeah,
funny
that's a great
story,
story.
a
That's a
little
great story.
untraditional.
Yeah, that's your school bus met like took a ride, missed your bus and met Jeff Bezos thing we were talking about. It's
Yeah.
like your crazy moment of like the trajectory change for your life was shooting your shot on a job that people are like, you're not gonna probably not gonna get that, and you're only like, well, it's only this one, and that's so unique. Like I love that story. It's super cool.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And
100%.
on the maybe we'll talk about the AR contacts part because that's like that can get pretty like deep technically on
Oh
like
yeah.
feasibility side of things and hardware. So maybe we'll plug that in the later segment where we talk about that like headsets and Varjo's headset specifically. Um,
Sure.
but we can if you're ready, if you want to dump into like segment one here, talking about like 3D GS and lidar scanning and data capture, we can. So um, I think maybe for the viewers, I'll start with like a breakdown because we've talked about this a lot on the podcast with a lot of different guests. But maybe this is your first time joining, and I don't want you to get thrown into like the fire pit without understanding what we're talking about. So in layman's terms, um, 3D GS is 3D Gaussian splatting, and a Gaussian splat is very simply put a way of representing a 3D object without using a mesh. And it tends to be lighter, and they have different usabilities, but it's opening up opportunities to be able to scan environments or objects and be able to represent them as 3D objects. Maybe I would say more efficiently. Would you say that's like a fair explanation of 3D Gaussian splatting?
Yeah, I think that's on the mark there. My favorite like go-to method of explaining what 3D GS is to somebody who doesn't know it is well, hopefully they know art a little bit, but like there's this type of artwork called impressionist or impressionism painting, right? It's like a bunch of little dots, and you look at it up close and you're like, okay, I don't really get it. But then you take a step further back and the image kind of forms, and you see everything together. And I like to think that 3D GS is kind of like that in 3 dimensions. And it's a way of recreating the real world with that mentality. Instead of little dots, they're kind of little ellipsoids, like 3D ellipses in space. But it's basically the same framework there.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of explaining without getting into like into ellipsoids and try to explaining that. I think that's like
Yeah.
a fair stopping point.
Yeah.
And then so scanning, so like how you get these Gaussian splats is you use scanning technology. So you're either using a phone or a drone with lidar scanning, which is basically it sends out a light beam, comes back, and it tracks that like it plots that data that it gets, right? And that's how it's recreating like all these different data points to create the 3D model, right? And then
Yeah.
also
You could
handheld scanners as
also
well.
Yeah, you could also do it without the LiDAR component as well. So now
Photo.
that reconstruction tech has like increased a little bit, and so you could do 3D Gaussian splatting reconstruction just with RGB photo or
With
video, right?
photos.
From
Yes.
pretty much any camera. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's like so photogrammetry is the other one outside of lidar, which is basically taking pictures and stitching them together. But even even now, it's like really impressive where it's called sparse image set, right? Where you take one picture here and one picture over here, and it stitches the middle, and you don't need
Mm,
thousands of photographs in the center, which is like this is a little more cutting edge, but it's like that's pretty interesting stuff happening in like the photo space for Gaussian splats.
for
Um,
sure.
so I think that's like the bulk of like what a Gaussian splat is and how you capture one. But like where it gets interesting is how do we use this 3D data that we've captured and reconstructed? Um, how are we going to turn this 3D data capture into profitable workflows or either life altering experiences for humankind? I think is like a really good maybe question to ask you to kind of kick off the convo on that, and then we'll dump into like what you're doing at Teleport.
Sure. Yeah,
Cool.
that's a bit of a loaded question. Like
Yeah.
I think I think that like there's a lot of implications for this 3D scanning technology. And that's not just to say Gaussian splatting. I think photogrammetry, I think NeRFs and neural radiance fields, like all of these are different techniques to kind of accomplish the same result, which is effectively create as accurate of a recreation of the real world as you can digitally in full 3D, right? These are all just different ways to do it, right? So photogrammetry is a mesh-based method. It's been around for like probably 20 years at this point, right? It's kind of goes back to the fundamentals of graphics and geometry and 3D meshes and making these 3D reconstructions of real objects and making them look more realistic. Neural radiance fields and Gaussian splats as well are more of like a volumetric method. So instead of being based on like triangles all interconnected to make your object, it's actually more points in a volume of space, almost like a fog of points, which creates your reconstruction. There are some inherent benefits to that. Like you said, it's faster, it's got better performance, it's more render efficient in that capacity. But I'd also argue it gives you a more realistic result. Like the downside with photogrammetry is if you were to use that for scanning a space and you miss a corner or you miss part of a wall or you scan like a featureless kind of wall, you start to get some gaps in the scan itself, in the 3D like mesh that's created or the object that you get as a result of your scanning.
Mm.
With Gaussian splatting, with NeRFs, with these more like volumetric kind of techniques, those artifacts are a lot less apparent. So those errors are not really obvious. It helps keep the immersion intact, but at the same time, Gaussian splatting gets windows a lot better, it gets reflections a lot better, it gets differing lighting a lot better. And these are all things that have a pretty big impact as to what we consider realistic without us even considering it that heavily day to day, right? So
Yeah.
you can think of, aside the fact that if there's a huge hole in my scan, obviously that breaks the realism. But
Mm-hmm.
even if like the lighting looks off and it feels like baked and set, or I scanned a glass window and there's like a hole in it because you can't get the glass that well, or the
Yeah.
reflection doesn't actually reflect anything. You know, these are things that also
Yeah.
break our realism, and these new
Yeah.
methods have really made significant improvements on those.
That's like open. There's so many things there to like to talk about. I think like the reflections is a fun one because it's so commonly brought up in this space.
Mm.
It's pretty complicated. Also on like the baked side, it's like if like baked lighting kind of takes you out of the realism. So does like a baked reflection. So if you would like, I don't know if it's like if you say call it baked, but if you capture a reflection from a certain perspective, like when you move through a Gaussian splat, like the does the reflection change as you move through it in 3D space to reflect like the accuracy of like the perspective you're looking at that reflection? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. There's this effect called view dependency, which basically means
Okay.
like where I'm at in the scene changes with me. The scene itself, like a 3D Gaussian scene, is basically just like a big illusion. Like we said, the Impressionist painting, when you step back, it all kind of comes together. In the same way, once you're like in the right position, a Gaussian splat scene will look super sharp and super realistic to the point where you can't tell if it's a video or a photo or a 3D scan. It's super sharp. But to your point on the reflections, the coolest part about Gaussian splatting is that it's also got this view dependency effect. And so if I move my camera around, or if I'm wearing a headset and I move my headset around, I'll actually see the scene change a little bit and the illusion change a little bit to mimic reality even closer. And that's where the reflection part comes in. So like it's not actually doing the computation to calculate the perfect reflection like you would see in like a video game that's fully digitally modeled. What it's
Mm-hmm.
doing is understanding where your camera position is relative to the reflective object and kind of changing the colors, the opacity of what you're looking at of that reflective object so that the illusion matches the reflection. Right? So it's kind of like a really
That's
efficient,
really cool.
smart trick of making a reflection without having to do all the computing
Is
to get the reflection.
and the reflection is it like gosh, this is interesting. It's not it's not emulating a reflection from what's behind you in this scan, right? It's from the original. It's changing the original ellipsoids created when you scanned that mirror from what your camera was seeing in the mirror, right? It's not like live actively like reflecting data from behind you and presenting
Yeah,
it in that space, right?
yeah, and that's correct, right? Like it's not dynamic, right? It's still a static scene. So,
Yeah.
if I were to like move around and I had a digital person moving around in that reflection in that Gaussian space, it's not going to show the digital person, but it'll still show that
Right.
kind of reflective effect you saw while capturing. And the weird part about this, which you should check out, is if you go into any 3D Gaussian scene and you go into a mirror or you go into a lake or you go into a reflection, just fly directly into it, you'll realize there's actually depth to it.
Yeah,
So
it's
it's not
cool.
like a flat plane that reflects normally. It's like
Yeah.
almost like this exploded view of depth, which creates this reflection illusion.
Yeah, it's really neat. I've been testing Marble. Beta test is active right now. I don't know. Are you familiar with Marble from World
Yeah,
Labs?
I've come across them a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, so I've had a pretty good amount of experience like testing out all these different creations people have made. And some of my favorite worlds to go in are ones with reflections because it's like that's the stuff I'm looking for. I'm looking at water, I'm looking at reflections, things that are like complicated and I think that are like the most impressive if it's done well. To be like, okay, yeah, they're working on some good stuff in the back end there of their platform. And you're starting to see some like pretty impressive stuff come out of these like beta testing 3D Gaussian Splat World generations platforms. So it's
Totally.
like really fun to see the space expand right now. But yeah, like on that note, there's trade-offs, right? So like that's always a conversation like I like to bring up because most people want to just talk about the positives a lot of times. It's like they kind of glaze it, it's like they're always cheerleading, but like it's good to
Sure.
talk about the things that are difficult for you in this space and what are your biggest challenges,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
like do you have things that you're working on to like to circumvent some of these bigger challenges to make this more widely usable?
100%. 100%. Let's get into that because I agree with you. I don't like only talking about the positives. I think this kind of limits my salesperson capability a little bit. I actually prefer to talk about the negatives with customers and tell them where I think it wouldn't work today or why the tech wouldn't work today or wouldn't be a perfect match. So we can work around those obstacles and find like a path to the end that works for both of us and that we're not blindsided by these challenges. So Gaussian splat, just like any other technology, has real limitations or challenges. I'd say the primary one, the one that's most difficult, is interactivity. So the cool part about photogrammetry is it's really good for object scanning. And it's not only because I scan a water bottle or I scan a book or something and it becomes a nice object 3D mesh of the book or the water bottle. It's also that the way game engines are built are that I can easily grab that water bottle and move it around. So if I was doing some kind of like advanced VR training, it's really great for me to have like photogrammetry scanned objects that I'm interacting with. The problem is with Gaussian splatting, if I scan a water bottle or I scan that same book, it's not one output. Like it's not one
Mm.
3D mesh like it is with photogrammetry. It's 50,000 different ellipsoids, different points, right? And so if I want to move the book, I have to move 50,000 ellipsoids all in the same orientation and in the same like location. I have to find a
Mm-hmm.
way to select them, segment them, move them all together. And even when I do that, if I could do all of that perfectly, part of the Gaussian splatting like reconstruction method takes into account differing lighting conditions or like the reflection effects, these view dependent effects like we were talking about. And so if I take the book and move it to a completely different side of the room with different lighting and different,
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's reflecting differently or something like that, it still wouldn't look quite perfect, right? The lighting would still be a little bit off. It would still break the realism a little. So that's a pretty real limitation that we've come across now is like when we talk about Gaussian splatting in VR training, and training in simulation is probably one of the biggest use cases for XR technology as a whole today. It's hard for us to do interactive training with just Gaussian splatting. Sometimes we have to replace that with digitally modeled objects or photogrammetry scanned objects and use a combination of technologies there. And that's a pretty real limitation with the tech today. I'd
Yeah,
say, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna touch on the mixing of technology. So like,
Sure.
it's if it's like what this is where it gets technically complicated to actually achieve this. But like,
Yeah.
what like I think it's like there's the most likely future is Gaussian splats will be used for specific use cases, and like when you need this. And I was just talking to someone who owns a VR company that creates enterprise level like training suites, and I was like, yeah, like you could use Gaussian splats to kind of create like HDRIs and like the environment, like the real environment of the place that the training is gonna be happening and the work's gonna be happening in. But then the actual interactive elements are 3D meshes,
Yeah,
or
exactly.
yeah, well, yeah, because if they have like interactive elements, then you have armatures and things. So the most likely event in the future is they'll be mixing the two together. Um,
Yeah, in the short term, I think that's probably true. Yeah.
Yeah, until there's some remarkable shift in Gaussian splatting technology. But that kind of dumped me into a question for you. Unless you had something you wanted to finish on that thought.
No, no, I think, there are other smaller limitations. Gaussian splatting is pretty render efficient generally, but like it has some upper limits. It doesn't work on some
Hmm.
lower end hardware. But I'd say those are probably the main limitations with it today. There's always things that can be improved with the tech.
Yeah, that's actually the kind of the question I was going to ask. So like we're saving there, so to say, it's a lighter model, right? So it's not as data heavy. But then when you start talking about what you were explaining, like having a bottle and like moving that is actually quite complex on the Gaussian splat side because it's having to do some pretty heavy computations to make that look like it's supposed to look as you move it through this Gaussian splat. And so like are you saving on data but gaining like compute? Like is it heavier on compute, I should say? So like what is that maybe the is that fair to say? Like it might be a lighter model, but it's taking more compute to achieve what you could do with a 3D model much easier.
I think there's a couple different elements to that. Like one, from a compute standpoint, there's also the step of making the model first, which I think
Right.
takes some time for Gaussian splatting. It's one of the reasons why our platform is cloud-based, right?
Right.
Um, but on top of that, I think like when you're actually rendering it, when you're live, you have the final output and you're kind of comparing and contrasting it. You can go to the extremes with both technologies. Like I could make a 3D photogrammetry scan of like my desk, for example, and make it really, really detailed. Use like 4K imagery, 8K imagery. The textures are super high def. There's tons of little vertices and triangles in my scan that make the curves look very smooth and very real. But that comes with the trade-off of it's pretty heavy to compute. It's a heavy model, right?
Mm.
You could do the same thing on the Gaussian side. So I can keep adding Gaussians to add detail up to a limit, but if I add more and more detail, it makes the model heavier, and there's like a diminishing return on how much better it looks. It's not always more Gaussians equals better looking result.
Mm.
Like you could argue is the same with photogrammetry, right? It's sometimes if I go from 10 million points or 10 million polygons in a scan of a desk to 20 million, you probably won't even notice the difference, right?
Negligible difference. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess like it is interesting to think about like yeah, if this cup is if it's a Gaussian splat and this is a Gaussian splat and static objects will take less to compute because they're not moving. So you're not having to change.
Mm,
Is that true? Because you're not having to move. You're not having to like do as much like math on the thing itself moving through the environment, changing all the other parts of the Gaussian to like occlude with it. But like a desk is one thing. Picking up a cup and a Gaussian and moving it across it, I think is pretty like complicated on the compute side. Um, would it be
yeah,
easier
the inter
to use a mesh and move a mesh through that space than to use a Gaussian and move a
totally.
Gaussian through a Gaussian? That's a pretty
Yeah, I
like
think so.
warrant
I
like
think so.
rabbit hole question. I don't if you don't have an answer, that's fine. But like
No, no,
I'm
no.
just like
You're good. You're good.
spitballing here.
I think what you mentioned there at the end is like the mesh is definitely easier to move through the space than the Gaussian splat, just purely by like what I'm selecting. Like I can select one mesh, but I have to select 10,000 points to move an object that's Gaussian splat scanned, right? That's scanned with Gaussian splatting technology.
Right.
Um, I think that being said, like the two technologies can have both pros and cons in terms of rendering performance, but generally speaking, we were of the belief that these volumetric methods, both the neural radiance fields and the Gaussian splats, produce much better looking results. And for us at Varjo, just the parent company as a whole and within Teleport, quality has always been our number one metric that we judge ourselves by, that we succeed by, right? So if we can push the envelope on quality with any technology, that's what we're always aiming to do. We think Gaussian splatting can do that, and we think it does it actually quite efficiently compared to any other similar method, which lets us put it in a VR headset or lets us put it on a web browser, and it becomes a very smooth experience without losing the realism and immersion.
Yeah, and maybe that's a good segue to talk about exactly what you guys are doing at Teleport with Gaussian splatting and how you guys are using the tech and what your experiences are with it so far.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. So Teleport's it's got quite a history, and it's developed over a number of years. It actually started off kind of like as a brainchild development experience from one of our founders a number of years back, 3 to 4 years ago. And at the time, what they were experimenting with is rather than using static scenes, actually using dynamic scenes. And could I scan a scene dynamically over and over and over again, continuously, and then live stream that result to somewhere else on the other side of the world? It sounds like something straight out of Black Mirror, like it's the most sci-fi thing you can imagine. And that's kind of what gave it the name Teleport, because it would really be like you'd be teleporting to that space. You could kind of imagine putting on a Varjo headset and then you're in somebody else's living room and you can see that person there with you in real 3D space, dimension, scale. You can move around in your headset and you'd be moving around in their living room, but you could also see them moving around as well. It's moving, right? It's not static. So it could be pre-recorded to some extent, but it could also be live streamed. And I think that's what we were aiming for originally with Teleport. We wanted
So
to
like
do something
moving
live
objects
streamed.
as well. I got you.
Yeah, exactly. So we were actually able to like technically achieve that vision. It didn't look super great, but for the time it was like very, very advanced. The fact that you could see a room with our founder holding a book, and some people who might have seen this video will know what I'm talking about. He'll be holding a book and he'll be going through, like moving the pages, and you could see that in full 3 dimensions. You could see the room in 3 dimensions. You could see him turning it, and it wasn't recorded, right? So if he just walked across and left the scene, you would see that at the same time as well. The thing is, that's so computationally heavy. Like we just don't have the infrastructure for that today. That needs like multiple cameras from different angles. You're pushing a ton of data back and forth, not to mention like all the processing you're doing live to make those 3D models every, 0.1 seconds. Like it's a ton of data and processing that you'd be doing.
So I guess my explanation wasn't quite correct. I think I was a misunderstanding. So like, dynamic being like it was pre-recorded, but there's moving objects in that space while you're moving through it yourself. But there is this conversation around live streaming Gaussian splats happening with like volumetric sports and such.
Yeah, exactly. And that would probably be closer to this domain of what the original vision for Teleport was, is basically teleporting you to a space. It's full 3D. You could really experience it. Sports is such a great example of that, because you could imagine watching a soccer game or a football game or a basketball game live in full 3D from any angle. I mean, it's probably every sports fan's dream, right? To literally be there on the field without having to be there, right?
Yeah.
Um,
There's some pretty cool stuff coming out with that. Some of the headsets.
Oh yeah.
Volumetric sports is like really neat. I just did a podcast with a guy that does 40GS. And we were chatting about like the streaming capacity right now for doing Gaussians. Basically, it's gonna be a fun one to put out here soon.
Yeah, and it's still heavy, right? Like even today, it's still heavy, even with 5G technology. Like we're talking lots of data, right? We're talking maybe 2K imagery, maybe 4K imagery from multiple cameras all at the same time, 30 frames per second, 60 frames per second, and you're processing this 3D model to be created and to be updated every let's say second or half second or 2 seconds. Like it's tough, right?
Yeah, especially with
Um,
like highly dynamic like movements,
yeah,
like a fight or like a hockey game. It's very fast paced. You have
yeah,
a lot of
exactly,
things crossing in front of each other, which gets complicated to do. Yeah, so maybe like football would probably be a little easier.
exactly. Yeah,
Or
it's tough.
NASCAR. It's like a lot of telemetry there that's being used,
Yep,
data. So
yep.
like that might be better for it. But yeah, it's really cool. It's and not quite live. It'd be a little bit like I think the first thing we'll see, not to get into like the 40GS volumetric sports combo, but like I think some of the first things we'll probably see is like cutaways where it has like some
Mm,
time to render like a piece of like a highlight, and they're able to
yeah,
do
yeah,
like
yeah.
this 40GS like highlight rather quickly from like on the ground data, almost live. But I think that'll probably
Totally.
be what we see first in the space of that. But
Yeah,
um,
and this is all super exciting stuff that I think
yeah,
99% of people have no idea is even possible, right? Like you show
yeah,
someone this and their mind is blown, and this is kind of the joy of working in this industry is bringing 3D to the rest of the world. I think
yeah,
there's still a huge gap there that we can resolve, and that's part of why we shifted the vision for Teleport to more what it is today. So we thought the dynamic scenes in the live streaming, like that's pretty technically challenging. There's tons of stuff to do there and unpack and technology and limitations and infrastructure. What if we just did static scenes? And then when Gaussian splatting came out, we were like, oh, these can actually run on a VR headset now. It's efficient enough to where I can put it on a headset and it makes sense with the Varjo vision, but also with the broader XR vision. Like every time we talk about anything XR in 3D, if you are a developer in those spaces, like you know how complicated it is to make those worlds, to make those environments. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort. Like it's really it could take weeks or months for some of those, like the VR studio that you had mentioned that your friend owns, like probably spends a significant amount of time 3D modeling just the environment if they do that by scratch to make it look as real as possible. And so here comes this technology where I could just give you your phone, you can walk around for 10 minutes and scan your room, and you get a more realistic result in a few hours automatically than what you might have spent a month modeling manually, right? It's like a completely different order of magnitude there in terms of the efficiency of what you can create 3D content wise.
yeah. This gets so many cool things about this. So like we talked about this in depth on Annie Eaton. It's live, Annie Eaton's podcast. And we kind of breezed Gaussian splatting for like HDRI worlds. We talked about what it will be the future of 3D model generation by using AI prompt texting or image to 3D model. Is like there's actually some pretty impressive stuff out there already. But she's talking about like it comes out super heavy and like I need like elements to be armatured, so like the wheels, like she explained like a dumpster. She's like the wheels need to roll and like the lid needs to lift and like so you still need to do some of that, but like it's augmenting or making the process of getting to like the finished product much faster. So you can kind of like use that technology to make like the basic structure and then go in and edit it. So we're not quite there, but that's the future
Totally.
is being able to use these tech pieces of tech together to
Totally.
achieve those like really cool outcomes on the production side. Yeah.
I think the best way you can think of it today is like Gaussian splatting or 3D scanning as a whole won't solve the whole XR creation process, right? But
Yeah.
it takes out a really big time consuming chunk of it and makes it even better at the same time. Like I can give you a better result and you don't have to spend a month modeling. And that's time saved, but that's also money saved and that's efficiency gained for pretty much everyone building that 3D environment, to that 3D training, that 3D model. And it also gives them more time to focus on what really matters, which is rather than just does that shelf in the back corner look realistic in my training? It's more like what is the person actually doing? What is their interaction? What is their step by step procedure? What am I trying to teach them? It gives those studios more time to focus on what that actually is, right? And
Yeah.
less having to focus on is the lighting perfect in the back right
Yeah.
corner because I don't want
For
to break the
now.
immersion. Yeah.
Right. And this is like the thing that you always hear, and it's fair. Like people use things and they're like, they point those things out and they're like, this is never gonna work. VR is never taking off. Like that shelf looks like crap. It's like for now, it's like give it
Yeah.
time. because like the focus isn't that shelf. It's not these things in your peripheral. And this is like they frequently do this. They do like testing, and they do like ocular tracking. So they see like where the trainees are actually looking and paying attention. And that's where like they use that data to then like tailor their finished product to like not include stuff that's really not relevant. That's like taking up compute and 3D modeling time, which in return cost the client more money. So they're being like really efficient in how they develop. So yeah, but like in the future, those things will get better. Fidelity will get better. We'll talk about that in a minute when we get into like headsets and like optics for those, and like the trade-offs of hardware that you have to make right now to, we'll dump into that at some point. But I think there's still some fun stuff to talk about here on the teleport side.
For sure.
Is there, so like what else? So like we know what you guys do. We know that you're using Gaussian splatting, and you've built a platform for being able to host those things, right? Like, so what are the use cases you're seeing on the platform with people? Like, how's it being deployed? What are the more fun things you're seeing happen in the space right now?
Yeah, so there's so many use cases. I mean, it touches into everything that 3D touches into, right? For all the reasons we just described. It in some essence, 3D scanning is, I hate using the word democratized because the tech industry says it so much and it's so overdone. But it's giving more people access to create 3D content without needing to have all the technical skills. I don't need to know a game engine. I don't need to know how to set up Unity and Unreal and buy asset packs and drag and drop and orient and model and use Blender to create custom 3D model. Like this all probably sounds like just nonsense to somebody who doesn't understand this world. But anybody who has done 3D development knows that everything I just said is, each tool is 50 hours of learning, and I have to understand how to model, and I have to understand the lighting. I have to understand textures and normal maps and UV maps and all this complicated stuff. Whereas we just kind of built a platform which is like, here's a way to do all of that, and the output can be even more realistic. It's a reconstruction of your real world, right? It's a 3D reconstruction, and the result you get is more realistic than anything that you'd manually model. And you don't have to do anything. You don't have to go through a bunch of settings. You don't have to configure everything. You don't have to set it up. Like, you just give us the photos and videos. You do the scanning, takes 10 minutes. You could do it from any camera, from a drone, from a professional camera, from your iPhone camera, which ironically works best in most cases. And you get back a result that's like a really, really good copy of a 3D space, of a 3D scene, of a 3D environment. And Teleport really just unlocks that whole capability. And so recently what we've done is we've shifted to being a platform which allows you to automate and scale that capability. So now if I'm a business and I want to do this kind of 3D visualization, but I want to do it for 100,000 homes across the United States, now I have a platform where I can scale up that level of usage and I'm not restricted by it. So when we talk about use cases, obviously real estate is a big focus on us right now. Real estate in 3D scanning has traditionally been one of the biggest use cases, but there's so many more beyond that.
Okay. You got to it sooner than I was expecting, but all right. So let's get into this part, because this is like I think consequential to like real estate. So
sure,
there's a few ways to use Gaussian splatting and VR specifically for real estate.
Mm-hmm.
One being like one-to-one scale walkthroughs of commercial projects or high-end residential projects that have 3D models developed for them already as part of the project.
Sure.
Another way to do this is with Gaussian splatting. So, like you said, with phones. So, I'll preface this with drones and professional scanning equipment have been the go-to for creating Gaussian splats for like high fidelity scans. But the question I was going to ask you is like, is the future phones? Is there a way to optimize phones or change the phone hardware in a sense where it becomes like the preferred LiDAR scanning engine? And is that how we get into like opening up Gaussian splatting to your everyday realtor who can scan all of their houses that they're showing and have these 3D representations and take their clients through and walk through these homes in VR and save how many hours driving from property to property. And how many times have you, if you're a realtor listening, how many times have you taken someone on a tour and they're like, they walk in, they're like, no. Like, you could have solved that. And like
Yeah.
in 3
Yeah.
minutes on a VR headset at a coffee shop, and then actually went and saw the ones that they're really serious about. So like,
Exactly.
that's more
Yeah.
time for you to show more houses to more clients, equaling more money for you and saving you a ton of time. Like, so like, that's
Totally.
like, I don't know if I went on a rant there. Like, if that was like a streamlined thought, but like, yeah,
I've got some questions out of that I can answer too.
yeah, let's hear it.
So one, I don't think LiDAR is like required end all be all for creating 3D visualizations and for 3D Gaussian splatting. I think the main point of Gaussian splatting is like visualization. That's what it does really well. Is it the result looks super realistic, the visualization looks super realistic. But there are some things that LiDAR do way better that Gaussian splatting doesn't, or an iPhone doesn't, right? Like, without doubt, if I have a $50,000 LiDAR scanner, I will get a more accurate result of my space. It will be more geometrically accurate. I will understand floor plans. I will understand pipes and fixtures. Everything will be millimeter accurate. Some even go sub-millimeter accurate. Like, that's not happening with phones anytime soon. And I don't think that it's necessary for phones to have that kind of LiDAR scanning tech. I think that the specialized technology with LiDAR scanners, handheld scanners, is already maturing quite well to where you have that option if you need it. But when we talk about just the visualization side and creating 3D Gaussian splats using a phone, I think it's a really accessible way for a lot of people to reach that, right? I don't need a professional camera. I don't need a $4,000 drone. I can use the phone in my pocket, which has a great camera. Let's not forget that. They're 48 megapixel cameras in our pockets, and they
Yeah.
get plenty of resolution, plenty of great shots, which can be used to make a really great 3D visualization using Gaussian splatting. And so to what you were talking about with the real estate agents and with the realtors, is I see the future being this. It would be phone powered, and it would be closer to what you mentioned earlier in the podcast with the sparse imagery technology improvement.
Yeah. So taking photos
Um,
instead of LiDAR scanning.
yeah, you take a couple photos, and in the future it could even be just a few photos. Like, I'm thinking like one in every corner of the room, or maybe 10 photos in a room, or less than that, and we could kind of reconstruct everything based off of those photos. I think that's where
Mm-hmm.
the technology starts to become really, really accessible and scalable from the scanning perspective, because today we have the platform where if you bring us the data, we can make a million 3D captures, right? Like, there's no compute limitation to how much we can reconstruct and how much we can build from the 3D scans. The bottleneck is getting the data. How do I scan a million
Mm-hmm.
houses? Like, that's
Yeah.
hard, right?
Yeah, and
So
that's why I think the phones is like, it's a fair thing to think that like maybe phones. This gets the next part of this is talking about AR glasses.
oh
So
yeah,
like, it's like, do phones? Yes, phone. Like, I feel like phones are the future if you want to open up markets to the general people to be able to scan. Like, realtors don't necessarily, just to like harp on this part, like, if like realtors don't necessarily want to like deal with finding someone who can come scan all their properties. They want to be able to
totally.
like walk through it in 10 minutes and like be out of there and have like a pretty high fidelity representation of this. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be good enough to be able to have the capacity for a tool where they can walk clients through like a one-to-one scale 3D and VR of like the representation of what they might be looking at buying, especially if it's over long distance, if they're buying real estate from far away. Because otherwise, if you wanted to show someone 3D, like a 3D walkthrough, that you need to create a 3D model of it, which is like time consuming and kind of expensive. So
Yeah.
like, this would, if this is the future, if we do see this open up to people scanning things as part of their workflows, like, phones do need to get more beefy on the capacity side for either photogrammetry or for LiDAR scanning to create splats, which I think might happen, especially if like AR glasses become the predominant like field computer of choice by consumers. Then phones will, I think, probably naturally evolve on the hardware side to be a companion, either as off-board compute or for more beefy like capacity for LiDAR scanning or photogrammetry, etc., to like help aid the 3D visualization process if we're using glasses for most things. And
Mm.
I like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting like path to go down. I think like the AR and AI glasses are, I guess they're kind of two different categories, but we've seen them blended all the time now with the meta glasses that have been released over the last couple of years,
Yeah.
where they just happen to have the AI functionality and they have cameras and now they even have displays in them. So it's kind of
Yeah.
blending all those worlds together.
I get fitted this Saturday for the meta
Oh
displays
yeah,
actually. Yeah, I'm pretty excited.
there you go. They were tough to get. I had to go pretty far out of my way to get them, and they're totally sold out. Had to order them online. Waited a month. Like it was a process, but
You've
they're pretty
you
great.
got a pair.
Yeah, yeah. I've got
Oh, you got
them.
a pair with you.
I've got
Oh,
them right
that's so
here.
sick.
Yeah,
I'm
got the
jealous.
band. I've got everything. I got them like 2 days ago, so they were a very recent
And
development, but they're pretty cool.
not to not to derail us, but like that's kind of sick. So like this is like, I mean, this just came out, and this is like kind of like this is a big deal for like smart glasses. Like we now have a monocular display smart glass um, model out there where you can see a heads-up display of text messages and walking directions. Like this is a big moment for humans, and this ties right into I think the conversation I was just bringing up on AR glasses and phones and such. So yeah, what are
Yeah,
your
all
thoughts on
this
it? Like immediately, like from having it for 2 days, if
first
you've even
try. I
gotten
mean,
to.
I've tested it out a little bit. They're pretty good. They're the display is like full color. So some of the other implementations you might have seen are like just green, and the main reason for that is green is just kind of the easiest wavelength to produce and to work with. The other colors
Mm-hmm.
with red and blue and combining a full color display gets pretty complex. But typically when you see like one color displays, it's just green. And a lot of old AR glasses, I have the even realities glasses from about a year and a half ago, even realities G1. Um, they were just green text based display glasses. And so you can see like some text overlays. You could see almost like a, how do I explain this? Almost like a pixelated art kind of like overview. If you were looking at a map, it would kind of look like a video game map from
Mm.
1995
Mm-hmm. Like
of
eight
where
bit.
the roads are. Yeah, exactly. 8-bit. That's what I was looking for. But these are a step above that. I mean, you
Yeah.
could look at images there. You can see your camera view there. You can, send messages there. The workflow is definitely a step advanced. And there's some
Yeah.
improvements to be made still. Like, would be great if that display was in both eyes. You don't have the monocular
Not
downsides there.
not so far
But
away.
yeah, I don't think it is either.
Maybe a
I don't
couple
think
of
it
years. I
is.
think.
Yeah, yeah,
Just
I think
so
it's
amazing.
only a matter of time. Yeah, but you'll notice all of these are so interconnected, right? We talk about
Mm.
3D, we talk about AI and XR glasses, we talk about displays, like these are all interconnected. I could use these glasses to create a 3D Gaussian splat from the cameras on them if I wanted to. If I was a realtor, I could do that, right? Like this is all interconnected in this weird way, but it flows really nicely once you get into it.
That's actually like I didn't think of doing that. I knew you could probably do it, but I didn't. I think I maybe wrote it off because I was like glasses don't really have the onboard capacity to be scanning that high level, but like and they don't have lidar, so it'd be photogrammetry, right? If you were to
It's all
create a
video. You could do Gaussian
through
splat with
video,
just
right?
video, like just
That's
video,
right. It's
just
all a
photo.
bunch of images,
We'll do the processing in the cloud. So we just need the. I've actually made a couple
dude.
Gaussian splats with just AR glasses, with the last meta glasses, and they came out pretty good. I mean, it's a
That's
little
so
weird,
cool.
but the workflow is a
Is
little
it
weird, but it
is
was
it
pretty good.
because of the lens is a fish like basically a fisheye? It's like pretty wide FOV, or does that
No,
help
actually,
you?
the camera's actually really good, like surprisingly good. The colors are good. The camera's really good. Even these new ones have much better resolution. It's
Yeah.
more like I looked like a weirdo walking around a pool table, like facing it and like moving
Yeah.
slowly. It just, I think the scanning experience was kind of weird. It needs a little bit more work.
We'll get there. Yeah, we'll get
Yeah.
there. I think as society starts to use these more, the people will get more comfortable with stuff like that happening. But
Yeah.
yeah, I thought the picture. So the interesting part of that, not to, I don't want to hijack the combo too much, but this is
No,
actually
you're
gonna.
good.
I think this will dump into a good piece here. The way that it's working, it's not a traditional HUD, whereas like other glasses are just projecting straight onto the screen.
Mm,
It's waveguide, right? So it's still
yeah.
it's like a HUD. It's still like a 2D image, but it's not like a three dimensional. It's not spatially computed into your environment.
Yep.
But
That's right.
the waveguide tech is the precursor to what we will have here in the future, which is binocular 2-eye spatially computed 3D elements in your environment. So they
Right.
look like they're like actually there, not just like on the screen in front of you. But it's cool that they're using waveguides for that to achieve that, like the 2D HUD, if you would.
Yeah, and I want to avoid getting too technical as well, so that people still understand this. But the spatial part, or the spatial limitation you just described, isn't so much a hardware problem with these glasses as it is actually a software problem. I mean, yes, it is a hardware problem because you need more compute to do this like tracking in space. But if you had that compute available on your glasses, or like you said, on a companion device, like a phone in your pocket that you could access the compute from, you could actually make even these waveguides and this hardware spatial. You could have 3D objects anchored in certain parts of your environment, and the glasses would remember where those are. So when you're turning and displaying them, you'd know where they're at. And you have cameras on them, which are, it's not all the tracking cameras you need, but like if
Mm-hmm.
you were able to utilize the cameras on the glasses, you could still track your environment to some extent and pass that data along so that the software could do the math and understand where each digital object needs to be and needs to stay at in space. So I think it's only a matter of time.
Yeah.
But right now, it's like uh, it's just the compute thing that's the limitation. But you even saw those Orion glasses. Those are
Yeah.
similar waveguide tech,
Yep.
and it just has more compute, and you could do some spatial stuff with those.
Do you think we need to add LiDAR to glasses, or do you think we'll be able to do like VPS, visual positioning system, which is basically just it's understanding its position in space by using imaging for layman's terms,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, there's that VPS method. There's also a method called SLAM, which
Yeah,
ties
right.
into some of the 3D scanning world as well,
Mm-hmm.
which helps the headset or whatever device it is understand where it is in the real world. It basically helps it understand if it's like rotating and pitching and yawing, what we call like 6 degrees of freedom, right? Moving forward, backward, sideways in space, but also
Mm-hmm.
rotations. Um, as to whether we need LiDAR, and maybe this will help us segue into like the Varjo headset talk if you want to get into that as well.
Yeah.
Um, it could be helpful. I don't think it's a requirement, and I think it depends on like what people will really use these glasses for. If the spatial component is like super important, or for some reason 3D scanning through a glasses form factor really takes off, then having LiDAR on it would be good. But let's not pretend like LiDAR is free. Like that's still a hardware choice you have to make to put on a
Mm-hmm.
LiDAR sensor. It uses
Yeah.
battery, it's got
Yep.
weight, it's sizable. Like that's still a trade-off you have to consider, especially when we talk about like these glasses. Those trade-offs are super important. You have very
Yeah.
limited battery, very limited space. So do you
Wait.
invest in that? Yeah, weight and comfort, those are all critical. Um, so maybe there's a world where if those sensors become small enough and they can be added on, kind of like they were on phones, without much cost or weight or battery efficiency usage, that I don't see why they wouldn't be added on someday. I just don't think it would be one of the top priorities in that AR glasses world.
Yeah, I just wonder if it's necessary for the 3D experience. So like if you
Mm,
say you're moving through like an environment and it's having to understand you moving through an environment with a 3D probably moving elements inside of your environment that are I'm assuming maybe reactive to like the light in the space, so they're not all
mm,
have to all be baked. One second.
all good.
Yeah, plug my computer in. I forgot to do that. Running low
No
on battery.
worries.
That'd be bad.
Yeah.
All right. So the so it's like I'm wondering if like not to like paint the entire photo,
Sure.
like in that realm, like to interact with these experiences in the world, do we need lidar to make it happen? I guess this is like a question on the
Um,
feasibility side.
I I don't think you need it. You know, it's so this ties into everything. This is what I mean. Like it ties into so many different spaces in 3D and XR. You might have seen that this is a debate that like Elon Musk likes to wage war about. Like, do I put LiDAR on
Yeah.
Teslas? Do
Yeah.
Teslas need LiDAR? Can I just do it with cameras? Can the world be understood around me in 3D in real time with just regular cameras or with LiDAR? I, I think my uneducated response to this would probably be you don't need it, especially for consumer applications. If I was doing just the glasses. I don't think I would need a LiDAR sensor. I could get away with pretty good spatial tracking with just cameras being positioned
Mm.
in the right space and having the right algorithm to understand the space around it. The thing is, LiDAR would make that more accurate. So if I get tracking lost sometimes, or if my glasses struggle to understand depth of field pretty well, to understand if that desk is 3 feet away or 5 feet away, and that's important for whatever reason, then LiDAR is probably a go-to move. So I wouldn't say it's like a requirement, but I think it definitely improves all elements of the 3D process. It's kind of why you see it on our headsets as well.
Yeah, it's like how do you know how far you are, or how your approach is towards an object without it? Like, because you're using computer vision and AI to like make
Yeah.
approximations of like how, like through imaging, how far you are from it. It could be difficult to understand depth unless you're like live, like maybe doing some like live depth mapping um, as you're
Yeah.
moving. So it's like understanding the space through depth maps, um,
Yeah.
which is like interesting like way of doing
Yeah,
things.
it's eh, like the way any XR device nowadays will do tracking with just cameras and without LiDAR is it basically identifies like features in your space. So it might
Mm,
identify like the corner of this painting as like a notable feature, or somewhere where the colors are different, like the TV versus that white background. It will kind of anchor that as a feature point. And so as you
right.
move around, it will understand how your movements translate to the headset's movements in space. So if I rotate my head, the camera feeds are changing, and that anchor point, the orientation is changing. It's doing some math, and it knows, oh, okay, you rotated your head 45 degrees to the left. I can update that
Yeah.
for the 3D world now. The problem is with just the camera tech, you make small errors every second when you're doing that, and those small errors compound, they add
Compound,
up.
yeah.
And so that's where you get like tracking issues, that's where things get thrown off, that's where you have to recalibrate, whereas LiDAR could kind of help minimize those errors and make your 3D experience a lot smoother and consistent.
Yeah, I was just reading another way with LiDAR, and it's like more like the simplification of using LiDAR. It was like hit testing. I forget the
Mm,
actual term, but it's like all it's doing is using LiDAR to like recognize a hit on an object, and then it's like voxelizing it, or I don't even remember what it was. I can't
mm.
speak on it too deeply, but it's like it's just for like surface recognition and object recognition. But
Oh, okay.
it's like very limited. It's not doing these like constant lidar scans and like creating a mesh and stuff. It's just for hit testing to see if like where an object is in like
Interesting.
distance. So it's like limitedly using lidar.
Yeah.
I think I'm explaining that right. Someone else probably listening to this who knows it, and they're like not even close. But
I talk
like
like that sometimes too. I
there's
totally feel you there.
there's so many. There's just so much going on with all this. I'm trying to keep up.
Yeah,
But yeah,
it's a
do you
lot.
so I guess like yeah to segue us first to weave back real quick.
Sure.
I think I hijacked the real estate conversation. So like,
No,
was there
you're good.
something you didn't get to say about Gaussians and real estate in the future of uses for that on that topic?
Um, I think we talked a little bit about how like the scanning experience itself can be made easier and how that leads to creating more scans in the 3D real estate world. I think 3D in real estate is like the last thing I would say right now is you go to a real estate website and all of the pages look like they did in 2008, right? If I brought you back 20 years and you opened the same website, it would look the exact same. It would probably even be the same font, the same layout. Like they'd have photos. Maybe the photos are
Mm,
nicer now, they're higher resolution, the camera's
sure.
better, but it's still kind of the same experience, right? And if you think about this spectrum, like we call it like the real estate visualization spectrum. It doesn't roll off the tongue too well, but you get the idea. On the left side, there's just photos and videos, and we're pretty used to that. That's been around for 20 years, kind of gets the message across of the space. After that, you have these like virtual tours develop, and Matterport is pretty common and they're the leader in this, but there's so many virtual tour companies that do these like 360 image walkthroughs, right? You bring the camera, you put it in parts of the room where people would want to see, like one in the kitchen, one in the living room, one in the bathroom, and people can kind of jump from point to point like lily pads on a lake
Mm-hmm.
to understand the space. And that's
Mm-hmm.
better than just a photo of one angle of the kitchen. Like at least you see more of the space, but it's still it's not quite 3D, it's not the full 3D experience.
Yeah.
And today, like, those are on the left side of the spectrum. And then the right end of the spectrum is you just go and see the house, right? And there's
Yeah.
nothing in between that gap. I think there's a huge gap between that 360 tour, the photo tour that exists today, and just going to see the house.
There is an in between, which
Okay.
is so I'm gonna this is like, yeah, it's a step above, I think. Well, they're a little different. So like, I am an affiliate, like, for all transparency's sake, with Invis, and they're a company that does 1-to-1 scale walkthroughs of real estate in VR. But
Gotcha.
but basically it's just it's a very high res render of like baked, but it's really intelligently baked, of a SketchUp model. So you would take the model of your 3D blueprints, and you would load it into their software, and basically you could take that into VR and go pin it to the location and
Nice.
walk through it at scale. So like that's like, you don't teleport, you can, but that allows you the actual full freedom to walk the space. So I think that's maybe the middle point. But it's not
cool.
like imaging. It's not like you went there and scanned it. This is just a 3D model that looks really, really real, and it's only going to get more realistic. So I think that is like the end game for that.
Yeah.
It's just super high end renders, and being able to like do that quickly. For them, it's like a 6-hour, 8-hour render turnaround, which is pretty
Gotcha.
good, for how high fidelity it is. So,
Nice.
but yeah, it's really neat. Sorry, just
Yeah.
interject that.
No, you're good. I think you're right. Like, I think there are a couple companies that have noticed that this is a gap. I guess when I say this is a gap, I mean, like, for 99.9% of people. I think, like, most people don't know that there's other solutions that could meet that gap,
Yeah.
right? That it's just 360 photos that I see, or like a 360 walkthrough tour I see on most websites, on real estate websites. And then I just reach out to the agent and I can go see the place in person. And then, like you said, I get there and I'm like, oh God, this den is way smaller than I thought. The windows look weird. Like, it doesn't feel
Yeah.
right. There's
They're
things that are
pretty-
off about it.
There's some, I would say, maybe nefarious use cases, or use, like photos taking from realtors with fisheye lenses and really exaggerating the space. I mean, like, there is, and this is kind of funny. I don't know. I'm sure you've seen it. You go on like Zillow or something, and they'll like edit the grass and windows and stuff, like,
Yeah.
into like and it's not what it looks like when you go see it. There's no grass, or
Yeah.
it's like patchy. It's like, so like stuff like that is maybe circumventable by like good representations of scans of real estate, where you can then go walk 3D and not have to go there physically until you're sure you want to see it.
Yeah. I guess the point is that, like, there's really not much today that addresses that gap, right? And
Yeah.
I think it's a shame for everyone involved, right? You don't want to be the person who goes to see the apartment, you're like, this doesn't look anything like the photos or the 360 walkthrough. I didn't get a sense of scale, or if this space, like, this
Yeah.
was a waste of my time, but it's also a waste of the realtor's time, or the agent's time, right? They don't want to be like
Yeah.
constantly helping people who are getting misunderstood views of the space that they're trying to purchase or they're trying to rent, right?
Yeah. It's a huge
It's
pain point.
totally. It's a real problem, and it leads to thousands of hours wasted, time wasted, again, money wasted. Like, it all kind of loops together in that regard. And so we think that Teleport could be a great solution for the real estate industry to help bridge that gap, and also to do it at significant scale. A lot of these real estate platforms talk about million plus listings all over the world. Like, you go anywhere in Europe, most of the platforms have hundreds of thousands or millions of listings. And the question is, how do I make these 3D tours like scalable? And I think that starts to get at the answer. What we're building with Teleport starts to get at the answer, to where we can give you a platform to where you help collect the data. We help train you on how to collect the data and what to do. We can get really great results. We can reconstruct them all in a couple weeks we're talking a million scans. And then we can get those to your website so that your viewers can actually experience them smoothly, easily. They see what you want them to see, but they can also explore and get a full sense of what the space is. I think in my mind, that's like, it's just the tech feels the same as 20 years ago. We could time travel back 10 years and it would be the exact same website, be the exact same layout, same photos, same everything.
And that's yeah, I mean, that's like a pretty good like representation of what the construction industry is. Cause like the one part we didn't talk about was the building process of using this same tech,
Mm.
which is like you can take, and I've done this with, so I come from construction, commercial construction specifically, and I still do it. So I'd recently just used the Invis platform for walking the clients through the project with the materials that they selected. And the first use case of it was the architectural, um, just the skeleton basically. This was like this is all like lamb beam, like big beams that all connected to each other with all these different brackets, and this is like, it's really complex. So I
Nice.
used that with the on the ground crew, like all the workers, and it was like, hey, here's how this works, because they got like 50 pallets of a bunch of random stuff, and they're like, I have no idea where this stuff goes, and the blueprints aren't always good. It's quite common. So it was super helpful to have this like 3D 1-to-1 scale like visualization. What that did was they just sped up their workday by 5 hours, not trying to like
Nice.
play around. Like they saved a ton of time. And then it's this is great for like change orders, which is like something that plagues the construction industry. Costs a lot of time, costs a lot of money. You go in, you pick the wrong materials, they put it in, they want to change it. You can basically solve that by getting them in 1-to-1 scale and seeing high fidelity renders of their materials like on the actual building, walking through it, and they make a decision that's going to stick. And that it helps them make decisions faster too, which we've noticed, which is like really, really great, because that saves a lot of time for the builders and it saves money for the client. And if the builders are saving time, that means they can build more buildings in a year, which means
Totally.
they're making more money. So like, yeah, there's so many ways to use this. They're like super awesome. All right, so we got a technical difficulty there. We were talking about um, the construction industry and Gaussian splatting, and we beat it to death. So we're like we've lost our train of thought on exactly where we were. So like we could take that and move into like the segment 3, which is the XR headsets by Varjo, and what all you guys are building with that. What's the use cases for you guys at the current stage in your development?
Sure.
If you want to go back and brief, I had a question on AR glasses. Like, this is like, you don't have to have the answer for this, but what do you think on this specific question? Do you think AR glasses are going to be widely adopted within 5 years by the consumer market, or is it even
Hmm.
hardware? Is it even like possible with the hardware that we have now to mass adopt?
I think it's going to be possible quite soon. I don't think today's hardware is feasible enough yet. That's not to say it's a technical limitation. That's more, it's a cost limitation.
Right.
You saw the Orion prototype from Meta. Those are rumored to cost anywhere from 10 grand to 100 grand per unit. Um, Also, it's kind of got a little bit of like silicon wafer type manufacturing there. These silicon carbide waveguides, the way they're manufactured is like not 100% reliable. Like you get some difficult yield outputs, and
Mm.
not every single one that's coming off the line is actually good enough to work functionally. So I'm sure that's contributing to the cost as well. Tech wise, totally going to happen. The thing is, and the tech industry has learned this lesson one too many times the hard way, is you can't just will a technology into reality and all of a sudden everyone adopts it, right? Like there's so many other elements to it. Like, what is the user experience? What is the design? How does it feel? How is it socially accepted? Is it socially accepted, or is it totally weird? To a big extent, like a lot of early VR headsets flopped. To some extent, it was the technical aspect, like the displays weren't good enough, the field of view wasn't good enough. But there's also like small elements that had a really big contributing factor, like the comfort, the ergonomics. It feels heavy. I can't wear it that long. I don't like the fit of it. Or even all the way down to like it messes up my hair, which you'd be surprised how much that impacts adoption. People will be like, I don't
Yeah.
want to wear it. I don't want to mess up my hair. Great.
Did
All
you
your
did you talk to
best
Jonathan
people.
Stevens about that by any chance?
No, I didn't, but
That's what he said. I was like, yeah, it's funny you brought that up. That is a thing. Yeah.
yeah, that, and you'd be surprised how much little things like that matter, because at the end of the day, let's say we walk into a Fortune 500 office and the technical demo is perfect, the reconstruction's perfect, the XR demo is perfect, the interaction, the design, the headset itself, the hardware, we got the field of view, the resolution, like we can tick all the boxes. But then you pass it to some senior exec and they've got like 3 minutes of their time, right? And they put it on and they're like, oh, you messed up my hair for my next meeting. That's all they're going to remember, right? So there's all these elements to tech adoption that it's not just the technology that makes it really difficult. On top of that,
Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah, the people
I'm
problem.
I have a finance background. It's what I studied in college. I love just like learning about markets, doing it on the side. It's just kind of a hobby for me nowadays. The one thing I've learned from that sphere is predicting timing is notoriously difficult. You and I might be
Mm.
100% right as to what the technology is, but 5 years, 10 years, 7 years, there's so many factors that could get in the way of that timeline being anywhere near accurate, right? I mean, we've heard about VR headsets going mainstream for 20 years if you think about it. Oculus was the first attempt, kind of got there, but that's nowhere near like full mainstream. Um, so timing wise, really hard to say. 5 years, that it's possible. I don't know if it's like for sure, but tech wise, I think we're for sure on the path to get there. It's totally possible. It's more like a social thing. Are people willing to have this technology around? And I think you got to get the weight down a little bit. You got to get the resolution up a little bit in the user experience. But I mean, this neural band that was created is a huge jump in user experience. It makes it so
Yep.
much easier, right? You don't have to flail
So
around your
cool.
hands.
Yeah, so if you're listening to this and so first, I'm in lockstep with you on your view on that. Second, yes, the neural band is so cool. I think it's using EMG, which is like your electro signals going through your hands,
Yep.
and also like wrist movement, so it's like tracking some of that. So you're able to control your basically, if you want to say your cursor or your experience on the display by, your hand can be down at your side. You don't need to do this, which is like, really important for like the UX of for the future for AR is like,
Totally.
people are like, I don't want to be walking around the world like doing this, I don't want to see the world that's like people are just like
For
this all
sure.
the time. It looks crazy, but like we've kind of solved that, like
Yeah.
in part with the neural band, which is like really, really good. That's a good step forward
100%
for the
agree.
tech. Yeah.
Those user experience, like thinking about how you design that user experience is so important. And that goes all the way from the hardware to what they see to the field of view and all the technical specs of any headset or head worn device. But it
Mm.
also means, how does it feel? Can I wear it for 2 hours? Does it have a charge for that long, or do I have to uncharge it? And how does that like process feel? How do I select items in my UI? How do they look spatially? How distracting is it from the real world around me? Because we don't want to pull people too far away from that for sure. The whole point of this is to kind of
Mm-hmm.
wed the two in a really natural way, right?
Yeah.
Those are all
So,
super important questions.
yeah. Those are. I think those are the two pillars, if you would. It's probably a third, but like or more. But the two most important parts for the adoption on mass scale is I don't think people have a problem with putting glasses on their face. It's
Yeah.
really not all that. I mean, like you're holding a phone, you're staring at this little cube all day long.
Yeah.
People at one point said like no one will ever do that. And, like here we are.
Exactly.
I think people
Exactly.
wear glasses, but like it really, like you said, it's really important that like we nail down the UX, like how we're interacting with the technology, and then also it's really important that the artists and the people who are being the visionaries for developing the interactions on these headsets are thinking about how do we mix, like you said, how do we mix the user's like normal life with adding 3D overlays and making that feel natural and making it do things better than the way we're currently doing them, and actually like, wow, this is like, I have to have this because this is such a big advancement to the way I've been doing things. It's so
For sure.
helpful, and it feels embedded. It doesn't feel like you're just like people. I think people are like pretty worried. Like this is the one thing that just like the normies. This is not a derogatory term towards you guys. It's like people who aren't like deep into this stuff. I just call you normies. But like the normies, every time I talk to them about like XR, they're like they always bring up like there's gonna be ads everywhere and like you're not gonna be able to get away from it. It's like
Yeah.
that's a fair point. It's like we got to make sure that we're not developing the future that people don't want. It's like it's really
Totally.
important. Yeah.
That's such a important topic to address. Like, how do you really build XR into today's world? And lots of different companies have different takes. Like I think Even Realities made these G1 glasses that are super minimalist, and they went with the design and the form factor first. So they're so light, they feel like completely normal glasses. I think they feel lighter than most normal glasses. Like you really can't tell at all that they have any tech in them, but they have displays in them. And I can see messages, I can see some news, I can see like, and that's one kind of format. Another format might be these meta glasses, which are a good deal bulkier. They're a good deal heavier. You'll feel them, but they have cameras, they have speakers, they have color display. You can connect your Instagram to the thing. Like there's so much more functionality tied into that to where you could
Hmm.
reasonably in a year or two start to see that as being like a phone replacement if you're not super heavy into using your phone. Like realistically, I would want to use that and not be sucked into social media 24/7, not be on my phone 24/7. It's a more integrated way of experiencing this tech. But the
Hmm.
flip side is like you describe, it's all about the design there, right? Like I could
Yeah.
build it so that I have ads everywhere and it's intruding into your life and you can't even see when you cross the street. And would it make me a ton of money? Probably, but it also wouldn't
Yeah.
be the best way to bring that tech to the world, for sure.
No, no, and it's like I think that there's a few things there. Like one you can actually like just replace ads with other images, or just like with the technology. Like that literally, you could do the opposite, and you could block ads, which you can't do with your own eyes or your phone, which
Yeah.
is like really neat. But like the other cool thing you brought up there is people using tech in a different way than we currently use it. So there's actually some like at least grumblings I've seen in like in the social media world where people are just like the new generation. They're just like they're kind of starting to like become aware of like doom scrolling and like we're
Yeah.
using tech for the most part. You're scrolling on Instagram or TikTok. That's the predominant share of using our phones, like by a large margin. It's either it's messaging and it's like watching content. Um, do we see like do we see AR like bring in this new era of using tech more intelligently and more like I guess intently and like intentfully, where
Yeah.
we're only using it for like the really core necessary things, and then we build these experiences in 3D that enhance our lives as we move through them socially or at the workplace. I think that's like
Yeah.
we're maybe at the right influx point, if that's the right term, for like something like that to happen socially, on the
Yeah.
social waters. If, you know, are people going to be okay with this on their face socially and
I
how it
totally agree.
works, right?
I
Yeah.
think it's all about like how these companies choose to design. Like, what are their design philosophies? What do they really care about? What is the user experience they're trying to craft? In XR, that's so critically important. You think about every single thing we do in 3D and in digital worlds, it's very much centered around what is the end user's experience at the end of the day. Like, what are they
Yeah.
trying to accomplish? Sure, is there ROI behind that? And there's all the business portion of it. But there's also like, if I'm the person using the application or using the technology, I'd prefer that it doesn't suck, you know? I'd prefer that it like works well and it's convenient, but it's also not a distractor. It's not making my life worse in any way. I think technology's
Mm-hmm.
goal is always to improve your day-to-day life. And so you want to do that with XR tech as well.
Mm-hmm.
As to how much that's going to happen, it's all up to the companies developing it, what their design philosophies are and what their values are, like what they really stand by. Some will be very much reserved in that capacity and will not flood you. I could totally see
Mm-hmm.
others come up and say, hey, we could put so much cool stuff in your world and you basically have 3D brain rots. What are you down?
Yeah.
Like you open to it? And I think there'll be some people who say yes and they'll probably make a ton of money off them too. So it'll be a kind of a battle of the theories or of the values there.
Well, I guess like what we don't want to see is the, if you would, the streaming, like what happened to streaming. So like it's like you get enticed into this thing that's really great, and then all of a sudden the price starts creeping up in the background, and then
The
all of a
rug's
sudden
pulled
like
out.
yeah, and all of a sudden there's ads on like this platform you pay for. It's like, wait, why
Yep.
I'm paying to not have ads? Like now I'm not have to pay for an extra tier to not have ads. I hope like that's just like hopefully not like transferred over to this tech in the future. But you know how businesses are. I mean, that's like that ties into like a really fun like future question on how this
Mm,
works on like the layer like application layer base,
sure.
uh,
Yeah.
or like hardware base, like how these different hardware manufacturers will have like their own walled gardens. Is it
Mm,
like how do we deploy 3D experiences on the map? What's the map? Who owns the mapping data? They all have their own maps.
right.
How do you trigger an experience? Is it just already there? Do you have to is it geofenced? Are you going to be able to see experiences on Meta as you can see them on Apple? Or is it like you have to have two headsets, or like you'll never be at experience? It's like Halo. Like you weren't able to play Halo if you didn't have an Xbox. But
Yep.
then
Yep.
and then
The
they changed that, and
exclusivity thing.
it was awesome. It was device agnostic, and then, like that's what the people wanted. So I hope that like that's how we start this off, and don't have this like complete separation of hardwares and what's available to the consumers.
I hope so.
Because
Yeah.
it makes it a little difficult to like get a mass adoption, I think, off the rip.
Yeah. It does, and it's not, at the end of the day, it's just not the best consumer experience. It's not the best user experience, whether it's consumers or businesses, right? And there's utility
Yeah.
for XR in both sides of the world. Like, I think consumers always come later, but at Varjo, our focus is B2B, and it has been for the last 10 years. And now our focus has been even more shifted toward the defense space and the defense industry. And we get very real utility out of this technology. Like, if I can practice flying an F-35 and I crash it 10 times. Like, I didn't crash the real plane. I didn't lose $130 million, right? Like, and these are real skills that I learned that actually do translate to the real flight experience. Maybe not one to one, but we're constantly improving the tech to make that learning that you get in XR that much more real and that much more tangible and equivalent to real flying. And those are types of cases where you have really high risk, getting the full simulation, getting the full hardware, getting the full headset in, and still making sure like it's a good experience for pilots is a top of mind for our headset. Like, we even recently just redesigned how the head strap is built and the weight and the balance so that a pilot can wear this for 3, 4, 5, 6 hours at a time and train virtually. And it's such a night and day difference, like a really small ergonomic change as to like where the head strap's located and how heavy it is, makes a really big difference for the end user's experience. It makes a
Yeah.
big difference as to how much they're willing to champion that technology internally, and as a result, how much it gets adopted. And when you see that in businesses, that kind of spills over into the consumer world as well, right? So it's really important to consider those like design elements and those like soft elements of building tech. We can always talk about resolutions and field of view and all the hard specs and go back and forth on them, but there's always going to be that like soft spec element, which is just as important, if not more important.
Yeah. Do you guys? So like, yeah, I'd love to talk more about what you guys are building over there and how it's being used in the military side. But I guess like
Sure.
a just a like to preface that, do you guys have plans to kind of move into the consumer market outside of like military use cases?
Yeah, good question. For the OG Varjo users who remember this, we used to have a consumer headset. It was called the Varjo Aero, AERO. And I think it was in with our third generation headsets. So that would be around 2020, 2021, if I'm not mistaken. And it was a very popular device because it really pushed the boundaries of consumer VR. Like, you think about that time period, and there was like Quest Pro. Quest 2 was starting to get a little dated, but the Quest Pro was pushing pancake optics, and people were like, oh, this is pretty good resolution. And then the Varjo Aero came out, and ironically, it's like a downscaled version of all our other headsets. Like, it was took out some of the parts that made it super high resolution, so it was just pretty high resolution, but the frame and the structure was pretty much the same as some of our highest resolution headsets at the time. And consumers thought it was like really, really good visual quality, and they loved it. The thing about building a consumer product, though, is there's like, if you think there's a lot of business use cases, there's like infinite consumer use cases. It could just be in like gaming. Like, if somebody wants to buy this headset for gaming, they could be doing it for sim racing in F1 or for racing in NASCAR, or they want to do flight simulation with Microsoft Flight Sim, or they want to do, whatever other VR games. There's so many factors as to different games and NVIDIA drivers and the PC setups they're using and the cables and the ports that they have. There's so many complex factors that you have to take into account there that we're not Meta, we're not Apple. We don't have like 100 billion in the bank and 100,000 employees, and so we had to make the difficult decision to pick and choose what we prioritize on. We make those decisions every day, and for us, the business market just made more sense to our business, the B2B market, and more specifically the defense market there. Like we thought that we could bring a lot more value if we focus all of our energy and effort on those markets. And that's what we've been delivering for the last 3-4 years. So is there a world where Varjo re-releases a consumer headset? Maybe. Do I see it in the short term? Probably not right now.
So with competitors like Anduril and Rivet, do you
Mm.
guys do you, do you guys have any maybe rumors of creating AR glasses for military use cases?
I can't speak directly on future product development, but
Fair enough.
I would say never. I don't think
Yeah.
it's our immediate focus. I just want to like note one thing here is the developments you've seen from Anduril and Rivet are very operations focused, like in the
Hmm.
field, I mean, for military operations. So like I'm a
Right.
soldier, boots on the ground. How do I use AR boots on the ground? Um, Anduril actually is picking up the contract that Microsoft used to have with the HoloLens called IVAS. And that was a
Yep.
very, very big contract for bringing this technology to the soldier. What you'll come to realize is that like the implementation that was previously used for that project was flawed in a lot of ways. It's very difficult. It's similar to the flaws you see in AR glasses today with like the brightness. Like the real world around you is very bright, and it's very hard to make displays that are brighter than the world around you so that you can actually show things. Not to mention the
Hmm.
tracking and the 3D
Yeah.
spatial components. There's a lot of really hard technical challenges to solve there. And then you have to do it all on a soldier's helmet, right? He's not wearing
Hmm.
like a Ada 6000 gamer PC on his back, right? He's got like real equipment. So you got to do this all with very limited compute, fully offline. There's a lot of real restrictions there that make it difficult.
Yes.
Our focus has been a little bit different from that. Like we've been very focused on training and simulation, which is outside of like in the field operations, but helps prepare our military for in the field operations, right?
Which is paramount. Like that's your base layer that everything's really going to operate off of is their intelligence.
For
And
sure.
I mean Alejandro talked about this in depth. Like it's like them knowing the hard skills is like the most important. And then having this like AR overlay to like add a couple extra like frills to the process is great. But like don't want to see people in the military start getting like heavily reliant on like tech doing it for them, like thinking for them. Like they need to be hard trained. That's where you guys come in. Like that's really important. First step, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Obviously.
you need to have the training. Like at the end of the day, you're not no matter how good the tech is, if you encounter a serious enough situation, you will not have like the this is biologically limited, right? So your brain will not have the capacity to like try and understand both the situation and whatever your like system is telling you, and you kind of have to make an on the fly decision based on your
Mm-hmm.
training, right? And so
Yeah.
that's where that training and simulation comes in, where if we can replicate those simulated environments and we can give you infinite variations because it's all digital, then you can really practice every extreme scenario and build those hard skills, as you mentioned, and have that reflex, have that ability to react immediately without needing to depend on the system to give you that answer in the field.
Yeah, and that's kind of a big point. Is like it's got to be incredibly accurate because you're talking about life or death moments, and that happened extremely fast, and you have to make human reasoning like decisions. Where like that's paramount to like a computer's reasoning, on like what's a threat and what's not. It's on the tech side. I was curious. I don't know if you saw like Anduril's like preview of their AR headsets that showed like they're showing like human tracking like that's occluded by
Mm.
objects.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I
yeah.
was like very curious how they were doing that, whether it's a camera like net where they're sharing each other's feeds and using AI to like approximate location, or if there's a drone like assistance ahead that's doing like overhead reconnaissance and they're like stitching all this data together. But I was like, man, whether you have an answer for that or not, I was like, or like a theory on it, it's like that's like pretty consequential to someone's life, and it's got to be like very accurate if you're gonna
Mm,
rely on that in the field. So
yeah.
it's impressive if they're doing it accurately. So
Yeah, it's I can't be the one to say exactly what they're doing there. I have great respect for Palmer Luckey and Andrew and those guys
yeah,
who kind of were the foundation of the XR industry and helped bring that technology to more of a mass market. And I'm sure undoubtedly they have a lot of very smart people working on that technology and are
yes,
understanding it well. I can't say exactly as to like what I think the theory is or how it operates, but what I can say pretty definitively is at least that specific case hasn't been our primary focus in the past. Like I think
no,
it's kind of got some similarities with the risk level that you're discussing, but where we see a lot of like actual adoption on the ground with our headsets, in bases, like in locations where they can get real utility out of them today at scale, is a little bit of a different use case. It's not as much like operational and in the field. Like I said, it's more about like this understanding the step before, this training and simulation step, which is critically important. I mean, you can even see it with, let's take the Air Force, for example. If you look at the fleet of Air Force planes that they have, about half of them are trainer aircraft, almost half of all the planes that the Air Force has. So add up all the fighter jets and aerial tank refuelers and, whatever Air Force One's classification is, and all these different helicopters. And then trainer aircraft are about half of that. So just aircraft hardware investment for real flight hours is a huge investment for just the Air Force, right? And we're not even talking Navy, we're not talking Army, we're not talking, any other portions as well there. So we think that there's a large tangible market which we already have a really good foothold in, and we're expanding and building for that market right now. I think Andro and Rivet are focused a little bit more on the operations side, where there probably is
yeah,
some XR need too, but it's a little bit of like a different approach, a different use case than what we're focused on today. That's not to say we might not overlap in the future. Maybe we will,
sure,
maybe we won't. Who's to say?
yeah. It's actually I'm curious what I know. Like you guys are using this for training for like pilot simulations. Is there other like actual like, I don't say like operations where like not like tactical operations, but like say maybe there's like an image of them using like headset on a boat. Are they
Mm.
using that like for work, or is that a training sim type scenario?
I think it could be a little bit of both. And I don't have the full, to clarify here, I also don't have the full view. I've just gotten kind of the view of being on the sidelines of some of this, and now we're getting a little bit more involved with how this might even work with teleport and 3D reconstruction technology in that
Yeah,
industry, in that defense space. I think it's a little bit of both. It might be more the training side, but there's really nothing to stop it from being operationally successful as well in the very near future, actually. Um, you could even think of like remote operated drones, for example, or UAVs. Like, there's not a world where that operationally couldn't happen within a headset. Like, that could also happen within a headset where you have a remote
sure.
operator running it and they've got a 360 cam mounted on the bottom that they could fully control with the headset. Like, these things are possible. And with the military, the DoD, and not just DoD, but the rest of the business world and the entire world, it's all about like pushing what's possible and kind of making that a reality.
Yeah, I think there's like some pretty cool applications for this, and like the like if you would to say the desk job stuff, like mission control, like seeing like heads up if you're doing like pass through AR on your headsets and you're having like the 3D map of like wherever their people are deployed at, and seeing like live tracking marks like helicopters like moving like where their assets are at moving across the
Yeah.
battlefield, having
Yep.
like data, just like data kind of like the volumetric sports where you're like I think John Laporte did like the F1 called, I think it was called laps, where you can on your desktop see the like live movement of all the cars, and it pins like who the driver is and their speed and like all this data.
Nice.
I think you could easily, not really easily, but I think you could do that with pass through AR for like the ops side from like the command center. I think that's like an incredible use case because we're like visual learners. If you're looking at data on a screen, it could be not as in depth as watching it happen on or mixing the two. You know, like I do see that being like a heavy use case in the future
For
on the
sure.
operation, like operations. I don't know what you consider operations. Like is it like boots on the ground or
Yeah, I'm more a little bit referring to boots on the ground, but what you're describing is actually possible and being done today. Like we'll
eh,
refer to that as like sand tables, and
yeah,
it's
okay,
kind
right.
of like a 3D representation of like a map almost, where you can see your assets moving, you can see how the battlefield is evolving, that kind of thing. That's possible today. That's done today. I also think of like we partner with this company called Headwall VR, um, and they create this like operations center which can be managed in XR. So like a remote operations center. Whereas instead, in the past, I would need 6 or 8 different monitors, like placed in a physical operations center with 10 people alongside me. So think of like a mission control type place for
Mm-hmm.
monitoring my operations. I would now be able to
Mm,
have that all compacted into a headset. In theory, that could even be portable. I could move that to different sites and stuff. And that could kind of be
exactly.
operations too. So we're doing that
Yeah,
already
that's what I'm
today.
thinking.
And these kinds of use cases continue to grow. It's all about like pushing the kind of adoption and championing the technology because we think that it already is got so much utility today. For us, the biggest thing you'll hear at Varjo all the time is like heads and headsets. Like we just need people to try it. I can talk about this all the time, but you put on the headset, seeing is believing. It's a completely different experience once you try it out firsthand.
Yeah, it's the oh wow, like that's like that's the moment like we're all familiar with if you put someone into like a VR experience,
Yeah,
who
yeah,
where you're like explaining is not gonna do it justice. So yeah, that's it's cool that you guys are doing that. There's so many really creative applications for the current hardware. Not
for
looking
sure.
at like future stuff, just like what it's doing right now. Um, I think, and that's like it, like we said earlier, like the real important part of technical of technology implementation is it making what we do better? You know, that's
Yep.
like
Yeah,
always like paramount. Is it solving a problem? Is it scratching an itch? And it sounds like you guys are doing some pretty cool stuff over there. Which one of those happens to be the F-35 simulator. When am I coming out to test the F-35 simulator? Is the underlying
I
question
was
here.
waiting for this one. You're more than welcome anytime. Our U.S. headquarters is based here in Arlington, Virginia. So we've got our
Okay.
office here. I'm based out of Arlington as well. We actually have a demo space dedicated to putting heads in headsets for people to try out the XR4 and all the headsets and to check out Teleport in VR and to
Yeah.
try all these different experiences we're building. And you caught the timing pretty well because we're about to get delivery in about a month here of one of those. Like, I don't know if it's an F-35 or if it's a different platform, but one of those like fighter jet cockpits. Like, it basically looks like a cross section of the cockpit. So we'll have that in office. If you ever want to pay a visit, you're more than welcome. You can hop
I'm
in.
coming.
It's so, I can't even begin to explain how like insanely realistic it is. And once you try it out, like you'll get a sense of it. You put that on a motion platform, and I mean, I think
Dude,
you could really convince your brain that that's real
do
life.
you
Like
do you
it's
think
crazy.
that like hear me out. Hear me out. Do you think that if I put in the hours on
Mm.
the simulator, could there potentially be a Gran Turismo event here where I'm flying an F-35 for the military in a few years? You know, I think I got
you,
what it takes,
you
but
know,
you
there's
know.
I think like if you made the simulator super accurate, which obviously that's always our focus, like
Yeah.
these are real pilots in here. So like they don't these are not games, we're not just like, look, it's press the power on button like it's an electric car and now your jet started up. We want to like mimic the real
Right.
sequence, real controls, real everything. The one thing you can't mimic in VR yet today is the real forces. And like
Gee,
you
yeah.
throw around an F-35 or some other fighter jet and that has a huge impact on your body. The way your blood flows, the like your muscles, everything. You're probably gonna pass out. But aside from that, like you could probably get pretty close if you had a really accurate simulator and you spend a lot of time in it.
Yeah, you guys could probably do the G's if you had a very expensive simulator with like an
Yeah.
articulated robot arm that could like almost like take all the 6 degrees of freedom of or whatever
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
many degrees of freedom a plane has, and like just spin them around like those NASA tubes where they
Yeah.
put you in the
Yeah.
thing and they
I
like
know
send
what
you in
you're
a
thinking
circle.
of. And they
You could
just
probably
shoot you in a
simulate G's
circle.
kind
Those are
of.
crazy.
That would be neat. Yeah, it's wild. It'd be neat if you were able to do that at some point and just like
Yeah.
really like amp up like the immersion for test or for training,
Yeah.
whether it's necessary or not. But
That's what I was getting at with like this is where there's like different tools for different use cases, right? And so there will always be a world
yeah,
for this kind of mixed reality headset to simulate this kind of experience and to go really, really deep into a simulation like that. But then there's also a world where like we just want to walk down the street and see what text message we got. You
mm.
know, you don't need a super heavy duty headset and like a pocket battery to do that, right? So there's different tools in XR for each one of these use cases, and we're always trying to be on the forefront of that tech.
Yeah. It's so I guess like the last question based on that specifically is like being at the forefront of the tech, like where, and maybe this is outside of your space at your company,
Sure.
on the hardware side, but like where's it at? You know, where what are we looking at for today in terms of like hardware trade-offs in optics, and what are some like, I guess the top of mind most difficult hurdles so that we could go like to the next level here over the next like say 5 years, 3 years, 5 years.
That's a great question. Um, for a number of years, I want you to think from like 2015 to 2020, the main restriction was quality. And when I say quality, what I really mean is like resolution. So if you tried a Quest 1 or a developer kit of the Quest, you know that those were like 720p basically on your eye. And your eye and your retinal resolution is so much higher than that. And so over those 5, 6, 7 years when Varjo was founded, I think this is about 2016, 17, if I'm not mistaken, our founders pushed really hard to solve that problem of quality. So that's why quality is like undertoned for everything we do at Varjo. We will never release a headset that is poor quality. We have pushed against it so many times. There have been so many times where we could have had the trade off of, oh, you can go wireless, but your screen has to look 50% worse or something like that. Like that's a trade off we're not willing to sacrifice. That's foundation, that's core to our company. The quality problem is like an asymptote though. It's like a curve that like reaches a level or a point. There comes to a point to like what we were talking about with the desk and polygons, where if I add more pixels, it's only useful to an extent, right? There's other factors in this display, like the colors and the contrast and the brightness, and more importantly, the field of view. And these also start to play more into the quality. And so now when we talk about quality, that's what we care about in the hardware is how do we push those other elements to make it a really, really full experience beyond just pixels and resolution. Outside of that quality question, that was the main focus in 2015, 2020. Up until now, I think we've done a very good job of addressing that. And now we've made very lifelike experiences in VR that look super realistic. Now the question is, how do we narrow down the form factor a little bit? How do we get it more comfortable? How do we get it more wearable? How do we get it to where instead of 1 hour, I could wear this for 6 hours and I can do my training, I can do my simulation, I can do my designing, I can do my medical practice, I could do all sorts of different use cases, which we had already been exploring for years and years in the past. And then outside of those two elements of quality and of form factor, I think there's also just like there's also still this broader question of like XR adoption as a whole, software creation as a whole. Like, how do we address those things? Teleport partially helps answer that question, where we make this 3D content creation and 3D recreation of the real world around you way easier, way more scalable, and we give you the ability to do that. But there's some broader questions around XR technology like that, which we're still aiming to address. So I'd say generally speaking, there's some quality we can continue to boost. There's some form factor we can continue to see improvements on from like a spec standpoint. Um, But also, there's a lot more to that ecosystem outside of just the hardware and the headset. And the core number one limiting factor that has always been the case for every headset to really push it up and beyond, and that we've always pushed against this boundary, is the compute. Like, it's just really difficult to, if you think about a VR headset, it's basically the world's most sophisticated display in 3D. And I'm pushing two 4K displays in each one of my eyes, and they need to be at 90 frames per second. And at the same time, I have to have another 4K display connected. And then I have to push two cameras, which are 20 megapixels per second. Those need to be going at 60 frames per second and pushing the info to the displays. All of that information needs to pass to the computer. And then whatever, I didn't even add anything digital yet, right? So I want to make a VR world. I want to make an application. I want to do interaction, simulation. Like, all requires more compute. So we're always looking for more compute. That's why we've had a cabled, tethered headset for our entire customer's history, is because we're always pushing that boundary of how do we get more compute out of that experience.
Yeah, and latency is a big thing there too.
Yeah.
Or you can have all of that, but it's got to be fast.
Like really fast, right?
And luckily, we've got an incredibly talented team and engineers that are the smartest in the world, bar none, for XR, coming from all the largest companies around the world to come work at Varjo and to help push this technology. They've done a really good job of building that tech, and it's a pretty unique experience.
It's nice to hear like what you the community there. You guys have like a really nice mission, and I think it's admirable that you have this, like, we're not willing to sacrifice quality, and while having to like face these sacrifice scenarios, like you're having these trade-offs you have to make, but there's this like high level of expectation to come out with something that's incredibly high fidelity and user friendly, and it doesn't weigh too much. And the X4 is sexy, by the way. It's like a really, really pretty headset. So it's like it's nice.
It's solid.
It's nice to hear that you guys are also kind of focused on like the platform side, because like there's three pillars. It's like it's the developers, it's the platform, and then the visualizer. So like the VR headset. So like those are the three core pillars that are like really important to this process. And it's nice that you guys are doing two of those, and making it more feasible for people to do really cool stuff with extended reality.
For sure. Yeah, we've always been focused on the hardware first and foremost and making that experience the best. But then it's always also been very open. So like really any developer can build off almost any 3D application or software, whatever their use case is. And so that's how we get so many use cases outside of just defense. We talk about architecture and design and automotive use cases and medical research and higher education research. And there's so many different categories there because we have that mentality. But for us, the hardware is first and foremost. Like, the most important element is the quality. That's always been the case. You see that on the software side with Teleport now. We think we have the best quality 3D Gaussian splatting reconstruction. And especially now at a state where you could do this at a pretty large scale and automate it as well. So those values, I think, are critical for any company, for any group of people, for any individual, right? Like, you really need to believe in something and to stick with it. And if you stray from that too much, you kind of like lose yourself in that process too. So I've seen it in my own life. I've seen it in all of my colleagues. We see it at the company. It's something that we absolutely stand by.
That's great. That's great to hear. It's also nice to hear that like that curve is kind of like settling down, of like trying to get to a point where we got quality so we could focus on the platform so we can get cool ideas to it. It's cool that we're there. It feels like it's got some like real momentum here where we're not trying to fight trade-offs as much to get like high quality experiences out of the headset, or performance out of the headset. So that's really nice to hear. And I guess in like closing, so since we're reaching the like hour 40 here, do you have any advice? I didn't add this into like the preface for the podcast, but like I think it's important to add advice coming from like being in a position at a company that's doing some pretty important stuff with VR, to specifically like students that want to pursue something like this. Is there any advice you have for them that you think is important for them to know now while they're kind of in that phase of learning?
Yeah. I wasn't a student too long ago. I used to be able to say that with a little more conviction, and now that's less and less the case every year. And so I still can relate with like what it was like being in their shoes. And I still talk with students who try and get into this industry on a pretty regular basis and have questions and want to learn how to get into it. I think the two main things that you need to always keep with you, regardless of industry, this is true of XR, this is true of anywhere else in any other industry. You have to stay like irrationally curious. You have to always ask questions about why, what is the point of this? Why do I care? Like you have to have that passion, that drive, but really what that is just curiosity. Like I want to learn more about the tech. I want to learn more about this world. I want to learn more about the use cases, why it could be cool, why it could be useful. And then on top of that, you just have to stay adaptable. Like especially in today's world, in a world of AI and tech changes so much faster every year, and that is only accelerating. I think we're kind of moving away from the world of I study something for 10 years and I get really good at it and I stick with that for my whole life. I think that's going to become increasingly rare. And in some cases, it will always be the case. Like, you're a doctor, the human body is the same. We don't evolve that quickly. So we'll probably be the same humans in 100 years, that makes sense. But in other regards, when we talk about XR tech or really any technology, it just keeps changing so quickly. You have to be someone who's adaptable. You have to be willing to just destroy the entire tower, restart, and not feel defeated by that, because that kind of rebuilding and recreating and the creation process is what gives you purpose. So I think those are probably the two most important elements for any student. Like stay curious, stay adaptable, always be learning, just keep up with the tech, keep up with what's happening in the world and really care about it. And you'll see the results come. You'll see yourself land where you want to be at, whether that's what you thought it would be or something else.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. Thanks for sharing that. Is Varjo hiring at the moment?
Good question. I actually don't know. I should probably know this. We might
No,
have
that's all right.
we might have one or two job openings. We're not Meta, we're not Apple. We don't have
Sure.
a whole department worth of people that we're hiring, but I think we're always on the lookout for great talent. And so if somebody was interested, would recommend reaching out to us and having a chat with us. As long as you're dead set on building the best XR tech and experiences in the world, I think that's what every single person at our company is focused on day in and day out.
Yeah, yeah. I will link the website in the podcast notes, and I believe you probably have like an outreach tab or open jobs tab there on the website somewhere.
Yeah, we'll
So
probably
I'll
have
link
something.
that. Yeah, and then I'll also link if you have, and I always ask every guest if you have a book recommendation or a person that you think people should follow that's really influential in the space, or a white paper or something that's just for you, something that has to be shared with the viewers.
Yeah, that's a great question. I've actually got some books here that maybe can help jog my memory a little bit.
Okay.
And there's some of these resonated with me a little bit more. Um, the two that come to mind, like that are XR specific, there's this book called The Fouth Transformation, which I think is a really great book about augmented
Sounds neat.
reality and XR tech. It's got a nice cover to it.
Okay.
There's also a book called The Next Dimension, which is written by colleague Tom Emmerich. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing that right. Which also goes into AR. He had worked at Niantic and at Eighth Wall for some time and had great experience building AR experiences and products there. And he kind of helps get into not only the technical side, but more of this kind of like soft specs thing that we were talking about with how do you design an experience? How is it actually experienced by the end user? How do you make XR like a good experience that betters our lives rather than the inverse?
Nice.
So
Yeah,
those
I'll
are
pick
two
that up
great books.
myself.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
then
I try to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
oh no, I had one more, which was this book I've started to get into recently. This It's called Stolen Focus, and it's all about like very addictive tech and how we can step away from it a little bit and become like more in line with our general experience without getting too much doom scrolling, without getting too sucked into the tech world. I think just broadly speaking, stuff like that's going to be really important when designing XR in the future on the consumer side.
That fits really nicely with our conversation today. I think that's great. Those are excellent recommendations.
For sure.
I look forward to reading those. I have a stack that I need to get to. I'm working through a few, but I try to pick up every book everyone recommends and try to read it. So thanks for plugging those in.
100%.
Is there anything else you wanted to add on the recommendations list?
No, I think that's probably it book wise. I too have a really big list that I'm not getting to day after day, so I've got to pick up my book reading a little bit more. But
don't we all, man?
Yeah, but I appreciate the talk though. I mean, this has been super great.
Yeah, it's super fun, man. And I like for real. I plan on coming out there if the invitation is open.
Absolutely.
I really look forward to that. Hopefully, we could document some of it, whatever is like publicly available.
Sure.
So I can like share the experience with everyone. So I think that's going to be really cool. Maybe we'll run it as a podcast episode of its own. But yeah, thank you for coming on. This was like super informative. I think we touched a lot of really interesting topics, both future and current, for extended reality and Gaussian splatting, and use cases. And like I think these are all the like really fun topics to address with people who are pretty educated in the space. So I think you delivered on this. This was I think it'd be pretty fun to watch for everybody. So thanks again for coming on.
Hopefully so. Really appreciate the questions and the time, and I think we had great insights. You did a great job diving into these topics. So had a great time chatting. And the thing with this is there's so much more. I mean, we could go for another 8 hours and we wouldn't even touch the surface of everything. So,
yes,
definitely keep diving into it because it's a fascinating world. It's super incredible.
Yeah, it is. If you're someone that's just like getting hip to this, like I was 3 years ago, I didn't even know what AR was. I didn't even know that like face filters were AR. And then someone explained how they worked and the technology. That's what I got. Face filters didn't excite me. Someone explaining the technology behind it excited me. And I was like, oh. And then through pulling on that string, I learned about Gaussian splats and 3D reconstruction and I got the list is long. Like you said, I can go forever. So you start like learning about all these different things that you never thought you were going to. So if you're like a curious mind who likes to learn, this is definitely a good field for you because it's so vast. And it's nice because you're not pigeonholed into having to work on AR headsets or VR headsets. Like there's all these other pieces of technology that make this happen that you could go work into that space. So like you might find that by just starting to listen and get more interested in extended reality and see what is all a part of that. So
absolutely.
Do you have any I guess final remarks for anybody before we jump off?
I don't think so. I think I've said my piece. I'm obviously a big fan of XR tech and I love it, but I think it's really great to kind of be able to share this experience with people. And like you said, how you learned like just the technology of face filters kind of brought you into this world. There's so many entry points like that, and just helping bring this tech more into the regular world and showcase like it's not just some gimmicky like we're all trying to play in the metaverse kind of thing. Like there is so much real utility to what's happening today in this industry and with our customers today. We see it every single day, and we love to continue delivering on those expectations and continue growing that industry. I think really the sky is the limit when it comes to XR. There's so many different things that you could do with this technology, and we're barely touching the surface. So super excited for the future. There will be many, many opportunities for the students that are watching who are looking to get into this. I would highly recommend it. That's all I've got.
Well, I couldn't agree more, and I'm also extremely excited to see where this goes over the next few years and into the long future. So we're in it for the long haul. So it's gonna be a fun ride. Again, Sebastian, thank you for coming on the podcast. We'll see you on the next one.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.